Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephen Yahelka. As you may see my calling card right there. And just a couple ways you might be able to get in touch with us, at least my district of California State Parks. We're at California State Parks Mendocino on Facebook and Instagram. And we're going to be covering a lot today. So if you can, and it might be useful today to grab a pen and paper. And if you already have that with you, you can write down the website that's on the bottom of the calling card there, padlet.com/Hendy Woods/Redwoods. And that's a way that you can ask me questions directly to my Padlet. And I will be able to get through those. I monitor it closely. So any questions that you may have, I will try to answer throughout the day. And anyways, I think we got our participants. We got a couple people chiming in, and that's great to see. So I'm gonna stop sharing my calling card here and introduce myself. Hello, everybody. I'm Stephen Yahelka with California State Parks out of the Sonoma-Mendocino Coast District. And today is part of Climate Week. So appropriately, we are going to be covering climate change. Particularly, we're going to be covering redwoods, climate change, and fire ecology. This is in order to allow us to explore some of the things that are really, really, a thing that we have to look at right now. And it's really dire that we educate ourselves about climate change. As well, we need to understand fire ecology, because right now there is so many wildfires taking over the whole west side of the United States. Now, if everybody, if you can see me, hear me, see the tree behind me, can you use that icon at the base to raise your hand? I see you live on there, and a couple other people here. Good. I'm glad you can see and hear me. So we will be using that to allow us to interact a little bit. So let's practice really quick. Lower your hands. And if you have ever visited or ever been to a redwood park in California, raise your hand. Good amount of you. I'm glad to see that. Okay, lower your hands and excellent. Raise your hand if you've ever been to Hendy Woods State Park. All right, good couple people. Well, that's exactly where I am today, and I'm going to give you a quick look around before we jump into our topic. Now, I am in Hendy Woods State Park, a beautiful old-growth redwood park that has about 100 acres of old-growth habitat here. Now, the park is a lot bigger than that. It's 845 acres in total, but old growth. Now, what exactly is old growth? Old growth redwoods are the big ones. The ones that we're talking about are trees that had never been logged in the early settlement of California. Over the course of 180 years, old growth redwoods became a prime source of lumber because of the quality of these trees, the quality of the lumber, and they were utilized in order to build houses and structures during the early settlement of California. But in that, we actually wiped out, as a race, we had wiped out the almost all of them. In fact, we wiped out about 96% of old growth habitat. 2 million acres is the original extent of the redwoods, and now we're only left with about 750,000. So anyways, I want to give you a brief. Today we are going to be exploring a lot about the coast redwoods and how they are climate champions. They are the keepers of a lot of our climate, not just within the forest it's here, but they do a lot to maintain the composition of our atmosphere throughout the world. And I just want you to know that we're going to explore a lot of things today. And we're going to be talking about the stresses that climate change has on these redwoods, including our big topic of the day, wildfires. So let's take a look at this tree behind me. First off, I want to give you just a little bit of perspective. This redwood tree is about 18 foot in diameter. If we were to draw a straight line straight through the middle from one end to the other, 18 foot. This is a very, very large tree. Now, these trees can live up to about up to over 2,000 years in age. In fact, the oldest on record is thought to be estimated at 2,200 years, and scientists think that these trees get to be even older than that. Now, on top of being very, very old trees, ancient trees that have been around on this planet since the time of the dinosaurs. These trees have been around, this species in particular. Fossil records take it back to about 200 million years ago, the ancestors of the redwoods. That's a very long time. They are also the world's tallest living organism. As a species, these trees get to be over 350 feet tall. In fact, the world's tallest is 379 feet and counting. It continues to grow. That's just north of us in Humboldt. The tree is named Hyperion, appropriately named after a god, because it is godlike in how large it is. So take a look at these trees. Now, in order for these trees to survive for so long, they have to have a number of adaptations, which we're going to get into. But we want to make sure that we stay focused on climate change, because it is Climate Week. So raise your hand if you've ever heard of this thing called climate change. Yeah, good. I'm seeing most people raising their hands. Well, climate change is a big issue that faces our planet. And the thing is we're going to have to team up in order to have a solution. It takes an effort from everybody. But what exactly causes climate change, right? You know, I had put my whiteboard right there, but it looks like we're getting a little bit of glare. So I'm going to move it into an area where we're not going to get glare. So what are those things that cause climate change exactly? There are a number of things. Now, it's all boils down to, glare is something I didn't count on today. You all see that, CO2, carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases, which it has a higher threshold for heat in our atmosphere than our typical atmospheric composition. So CO2, and we're getting excess CO2, which is building up in the atmosphere, and that gives it a higher capacity for heat, which in turn, it's starting to insulate the planet. Now, we think of it as like if we get cold at night, right, we throw a blanket on us, and it gets even colder, we throw another blanket on us, and even colder, and we throw that blanket on. Well, what if, when it warmed up, you couldn't take that blanket off? So the clouds of CO2, the CO2 that's building up in our atmosphere is starting to create this ability for the whole planet's temperatures to rise. And we're seeing this. It's not saying that, that it's always going to be hot. It's constantly, the average temperature throughout the yearly temperatures are going up, climbing and climbing. And we notice that this is because of human industrial, since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen the temperatures start to spike, starting to climb. We're getting hotter hots and colder colds, because the warmer the planet gets, well, the more our climate is changing. Climate is a combination of the temperatures, the weather patterns, and all the things that build up our climate. Climate, weather, temperatures. We're getting more natural disasters such as hurricanes, bigger rains, colder winters, hotter summers, and longer periods of drought, which are causing a huge issue when it comes to, well, here in California. And the thing that's going on right now is tons and tons of intense wildfires. Now we'll talk about wildfires and why they are so intense and what is actually causing that, because it's a very complex topic. Not just climate change, but also the amount of fuel that is in the understory in our forests. So we're going to take a look at some of these things and what, whether they are adding CO2 or not, or taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, right? So we're going to start with your vehicles. Raise your hand if you think vehicles are adding carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. You got Matilda, 2, 3, 4. All right, we're climbing. That is correct, because the emissions of carbon dioxide from our vehicles is actually causing for a lot of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. You know what's impressive is that over the quarantine time, when we weren't all traveling around like we typically do, we saw a huge reduction in our carbon emissions. All right, now second, we're going to talk about this power plant. Now that stands for both the production of electricity as well as production of goods in factories. Do you think that factories and power plants add CO2 into our atmosphere? Raise your hand if you think that they add. All right, good. A whole bunch of A students here. All right. Now, what about this other thing, wildfires or just combustion in general? Is that adding? That's great. It is actually adding carbon dioxide in to the atmosphere. All these things creating smoke, which contains carbon monoxide, which eventually will transfer to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's going up. Now, let's see something about here. We have to figure out a way to get these arrows to go down, because there are things that naturally occur that allow for carbon dioxide to be reduced. So first, let's take a look at this. This is my pretty picture drawing of a ocean. So does the ocean reduce the amount of carbon dioxide? Raise your hands if you think so. Good. Yep, it somewhat does. So actually, the ocean, we get a certain amount of carbon dioxide which sits at the surface of the ocean, and it starts to dissolve into that ocean. But not just that, but in the ocean, we also have this green stuff called algae, kelp, phytoplankton, things that photosynthesize, are actually starting to take some of that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which is great because we need something to do that. Now, carbon dioxide added to our oceans actually adds to the acidity of the ocean, which is harmful to a number of our wildlife, like the crustaceans. Things that have an exoskeleton are having a hard time building those exoskeletons, or at least building them strongly, because the ocean acidity is going up. Now, on top of that, You also have like our coral reefs that are struggling because of ocean acidity. So we still have to reduce the amount of carbon emissions in order to have it. Now, the star of the show, and I hope to see everybody's hands, do the redwoods reduce carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? Raise your hands if you think so. Yep, they do. And they bring it down. They store it within the body, which we'll get into in a moment. Now, enough of the whiteboard. We're going to get back to this in a moment. So, yes, redwoods have this ability, and through this process called photosynthesis, they actually take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It's huge that this happens because it's part of the natural cycle. It's actually what makes our atmosphere livable for all humans, all wildlife that breathe oxygen. Well, we're going to thank the algae, the plants, not just the big redwoods, but also the ferns and all the different things that provide oxygen for us through the process of photosynthesis. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the redwoods too, because we mentioned that the redwoods have a lot of adaptations that allow them to grow for a very long time, to grow to be ages of over 2,000 years, heights of over 350 feet and taller. So this is really neat that that these trees have an ability to do this. So we all know that redwoods, or well, trees, plants, and all those things start off as a seed, right? And would you raise your hand if you think that since the redwoods are so big, raise your hand if you think that the redwoods cone and seed are large. Raise your hand if you think it's a large. Yeah. Oh. Well, let me tell you something. You're good to second guess, because the redwoods cone and seed are very, very small. Let me show you something. This is a redwood cone, right? Right there. And this is a fresh one. These fall off the tree just to give it a little bit of wind, or maybe get a squirrel running around on the branches. Well, the redwood cone, this is the cone again, not the seed. Within that cone is a seed, which is even smaller. Let me show you. Oh, right there is a redwood seed. Now let's take a look at that tree that we were standing in front of so long at the beginning of the program. This one right here, that started off as that little thing. No, it took a long time, because trees don't just grow overnight. In fact, they take a moment to germinate in the soil, and then after a couple things that it needs: water, carbon dioxide, sunlight, and space to grow. These trees grow into some of the largest living organisms in the world. The largest, or the tallest living organism ever. Now, it's all because of a superpower that these trees are important. This is how they actually safeguard our planet, is they do something called primary productivity, right? It's a big word, which means that they actually produce. That's where they take that water, they take that carbon dioxide, they use the power of their sun, and they produce sugars, food for the rest of the herbivores, which trickles down the food chain, so that the larger animals, the larger predators, all require a plant at some point, because they eat the things that eat the plants, right? But it's all because of the leaves of a plant, right? Now, this right here is a redwood leaf, green in color because that allows it to photosynthesize. The green actually absorbs a whole bunch of energy from the sun here. The sun is absorbed by the cells within the plant, and then it takes the water and the carbon dioxide, using the power of the sound, combines those two and makes sugar, which it will send down to the roots and throughout the rest of the body of the tree so that it can grow. So it has the energy to grow. So pretty neat. It's all called photosynthesis, but you guys are like 6th to 8th graders, so you should know about photosynthesis, right? But as the tree grows, it takes a long time. We might start off with a tiny little sprout, something only about this big. It might grow to be about this big in its first year, about 1.5 to 2 feet in 1 year from that little tiny seed. Well, that entire time that it's photosynthesizing, it's drawing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it within the body of the tree. This is called carbon sequestration, carbon storage. And this is what makes trees so important, because they store carbon dioxide within the body of the tree. Now, the coolest thing about coast redwoods as the forest, the coast redwood forest, is the #1 terrestrial carbon sink, meaning it stores more carbon dioxide than any other forest type in the world. So take a look at this section of tree that we have right there. Let me adjust the camera. Now, right, this is the cross section of a coast redwood tree. And we notice a couple different layers of wood here, right? Now, trees, when they grow from the inside out. So if we were to look at the oldest part of the tree, we might notice it's a little rotten, because if we were to count all the way out to this point on the tree, we'd find that this tree, this log that's, well, it comes up to about my waist, is about 500 years old, right? And that's an estimate. I haven't taken enough time to actually count all the rings, but I have done estimates on this tree, and we find that it is about 500 years old. Now, every year, the tree will add another layer of rings. But the thing is that all that's in here, every ring that it grows is another layer of stored carbon. In fact, one of these trees throughout its lifetime will store up to 60,000 cubic tons of atmospheric carbon dioxide. Right? So, but the tree itself, you know, one thing that makes this tree so hardy and also makes it a good lumber source is that these trees have this red layer, right? This is where the tree gains its ability to be preserved, because within this red color, redwood, get it? Redwood. So within this red color, it's actually collected resin called tannins. And tannins is a preservative. It's resistant to fungus. It's resistant to insects. Insects don't like eating it, so those termites don't get into these trees. And also, it's fire resistant. Now, on top of that, you have the least protected layer, which is called the sapwood. On this lighter color ring, that's the sapwood. On the very outside of that is called the cambium layer, where all the nutrients, the sap of the tree, the water, and the sap all travel through the cambium layer. And that's a living tissue. And when it dies, then on the outside, it creates another bark layer. on the inside, it creates another layer of wood. So that cambium layer is really important, and that's why we have this bark layer on the outside to protect it. Pretty cool, huh? Now, these trees do require a whole lot of water, right? Let's see. So trees themselves require about 500 gallons of water a day for the large ones. Now, trees of normal size, say a big oak tree, will only require about 50 gallons of water a day. But for the coast redwoods, they have to have adaptations in order to get water in the time of drought, in the time of when we're not getting a whole lot of rain, like the summertime. We typically don't see rain in the summer. In fact, the last time this forest had rain was back in late April, early May. So the coast redwoods have an adaptation that allows them to hold on to summer fog. And that is because they have not one type of leaf, but they have the other types of leaves. Now, you may not think that these leaves right here are the same leaf as, say, the other ones that we were looking at. These are skinny. They have smaller little needles, and they're all around each little branch. But these are the upper canopy needles, which these trees, again, reach up way high into the canopy of the tree, where you might get low coastal fog passing through. And these needles will actually grab onto that fog as it's passing through. Pretty neat. So it condense on these leaves and then rain down water for the rest of the understory plants, for the ferns, as well the other smaller trees that aren't reaching up into the clouds. So that's going to be important, is that they rely on coastal fog. So let's see. We're going to take a look into some of the challenges, because this is a complex issue. What are some of the challenges with the coast redwoods in regards to climate change? Why would you think that these trees may be at risk? Now, there are a number of things that cause stresses to these trees. And one that we were first looking into is this whole idea that these were going to be going through periods of prolonged drought. We're getting warmer temperatures, longer dry seasons, and less precipitation, less rain. As well, the coast redwoods have experienced a reduction less, right? No more of the summertime coastal fog that these trees are used to. We're getting 60% less coastal fog than we used to throughout the whole history. And this is all due to the changing weather patterns, all because of global climate change, right? Now, it's really not my job to tell you whether or not climate change is happening, but I'm producing the facts that will hopefully give you the chance to make a more informed decision. So we're getting less precipitation, longer dry periods, longer droughts, and less coastal fog, which the coast redwoods depend on, right? They need that 500 gallons of water a day to survive. Now, the real hazard that has been caused by the long periods of droughts and a couple other factors is the fact that these trees have very recently gone through a series of wildfires that have really done a number on a number of our redwood forests. Particularly, we know that Big Basin was one that news reporters were saying this forest will never be the same. But let me tell you something. I don't think those news reporters have the right information in regards to these trees, because guess what? These trees have been through fires before. They've been through very long periods of drought before. They've been through a number of different, what we call bottlenecks, where a species is challenged for its whole existence, and then some of the other species may fall. Well, they survive these bottlenecks, right? So here's the thing. Coast redwoods have tons of adaptations to allow them to survive wildfires. But the challenge is we are seeing wildfires of a magnitude that we have never seen before, right? Intense wildfires, but the practices of land management, the buildup of fuels at the understory are all factors when it comes to wildfires. Now, they say there are 3 major factors into how intense a wildfire will get. One is the weather patterns, how long it's been dry, whether the wind is blowing or not, because wind propels fire, right? And of course, if it hasn't rained in a long time, that's going to have a big effect on the intensity of a wildfire. 2, the amount of fuel built up in the understory, right? Now we're taking a look around here. We got some widowmakers, all these fallen branches around. We have the ferns, we have these smaller trees that are around. Well, in a wildfire, those are going to be the first things to go. And the third thing in our list is the topography, how the land is shaped, right? So take this area, and I'm going to turn you around so that we can see this area, lots of fuel, but the redwoods themselves actually dampen the effect of wind. So wind doesn't really blow through here, but there is a lot of fuel. But if you take a look at the topography here, you notice it's really flat. So the topography is an important part of how intense a wildfire will be. Now, I want to share with you, because I had a chance to go to one of our forests recently that had been through a wildfire just a month ago. This occurred in Armstrong Woods. So I want to show you just some of the photos that I got from this trip. So take a look here. You notice that the right side of this photo has a big slope on it. And you notice that the fire had come through and hit a lot of that base. Now, that is not just because the land was flat that the fire stopped there, but we did have firefighters on scene. We had CAL FIRE as well as the National Guard helping to protect this forest and this stand of old growth redwoods, which we prize so much. But they did decide that in certain areas, the forest would benefit from fire. Now, if you take a look at the top half of this photo, you notice the canopy of these trees are still very green. Again, you see some burn marks at the base of a lot of these trees, and you see charred scars along the base. But as you look up, you might see more of that green. These trees are still doing really well. The bark did a good job to protect these trees from wildfire. And moving on, one of the biggest benefits of fire in the coast redwoods is, if you notice, the duff, all the leaves that had fallen on to a thick mat of this forest has cleared out all those leaves, which actually benefits some of the trees that may need to generate through more seeds, right? You take out that duff layer, and you all of a sudden will have more sprouting of more germination of old growth redwoods, or of new growth redwoods, the new generations that come from seed. Now, one of the biggest challenges here, and this tree that we're looking at now is a tree that had been through a wildfire, and this is what we don't want to see, right? This tree here had, the bark was defeated at the base. And though this, we're lucky that this was one of our smaller redwoods in the stand, if you notice, the bark layer at the base of that tree is entirely wiped out. And that bark layer protected, remember, that cambium layer, which is where the nutrients and all the water is exchanged. So just wanted to share some of those things. But one of the things that allowed for the redwoods in, that we're going to be monitoring the regrowth of Armstrong Woods is that we were able to hold it off on that slope. It cleared a lot of the leaves, and even though it did touch the base of a lot of these trees, as long as that bark was able to contain the fire and keep the fire from burning the cambium layer, that layer that protects or that transitions all the nutrients and water. Well, as long as that is intact, it will actually continue to grow, right? So these redwoods are amazing in that the top half of those pictures, all green, right? It's because they're still very much alive. They're still doing fine. And those photos were taken just 2 days ago. All right, now, when it comes to fire in the redwoods, we want to talk about what these redwoods do to respond to wildfire. And we're getting close to the very end, but we have just one thing. The redwoods, after they have seen a fire, respond very well. In fact, what happens here is, say this tree was hit by a wildfire, it would maybe char some of this outer bark. And what would end up happening is it would expose the bud collar. Now the bud collar, after it is exposed, might get some sunlight, and the sunlight will actually activate new growth from things like this burl, this big blobby mass at the base of this tree. Well, that's going to be activated, and new growth will happen, which will cause a spike in productivity within our redwoods. Right? Now, not only that, but we got to go back to how the redwoods typically, how they would love to regenerate, right? Our redwood forest doesn't see a whole lot of germination of new redwood sprouts, other than the ones that generate the clones that spike out of the bud collar, right? What happens when a fire comes through and clears all this thick duff, right? All this mass of duff. This is all really deep stuff. If you were to clear all that out, exposing the mineral soil, then you have a chance for that redwood seed, that little tiny redwood seed, to fall into that mineral soil. And we see a response where redwoods are going to thrive from that, shooting out a new sprout. It's really amazing that through the destruction of a wildfire, right, there is rebirth, there is regrowth that occurs. Now, this is part of why fires in the redwood forest is a very important process. We used to see, on average, a fire in a redwood forest about every 15 years. But for Hendy Woods, there hasn't been a fire here in over 100 years. And with a number of other forest types, again, you have a buildup of all that fuel. So we got to think about how we solve this issue. Now, the redwoods do so much, remember? Storing carbon within their bodies, carbon sequestration. They have done so much for maintaining our climate how it is. But they can't do it on their own because we've noticed the redwoods are still very much around. They, they're continually pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, storing it within their very large, massive bodies. We have to think of how we can help the coast redwoods to be part of a climate solution. So, raise your hand if you want to be part of the climate solution and save the planet for all of us. Yeah, we all want to. Now, the way we do it, because we have all this carbon dioxide insulating our atmosphere and, keeping that heat from escaping, right? We need to figure out how to eliminate, say, this emissions from our vehicles, right? Now we can use hybrid and electric vehicles, but that just transfers an issue, right? Our electric vehicles, they also need to be plugged in to the power plant, right? So that just moves all those emissions into, you're getting nearly the same amount. We have seen that some factories are starting to reduce by creating this carbon scrubber within their smokestacks, which will scrub all, kind of stops the carbon from going out, but it's not 100% active. So we got to figure out a way to eliminate that. Which, let's see, if you had electric powered cars and they had to be plugged into the power plant, you're still getting a lot of that. But we need to get rid of those old fossil fuel burning power plants and replace them with green energy like solar panels. Oh man, so many ways. Solar panels, you can do wind power turbines. You can do, you can harness the power of water in hydroelectric processes, right? We got creeks and streams, and there are ways that we can utilize the power of water falling down, following gravity, and generate power that way through hydroelectric dams, right? There are tons of ways to make our powers green, right? I mean, we can do stuff in our own home, right? A lot of us can say reduce the amount of electricity that we use by turning off the light when they're unused. You can, the possibilities are endless. You can even ride a bike to work, to school, take a hike, take a jog instead of taking a vehicle everywhere, right? Even something as that can reduce the amount of fossil fuels burnt is switching your diet to be eating more raw food, raw vegetables. One of the top ways of carbon emissions is through cooking our foods. So it all takes a change. Now, one thing I want to have everybody do is make a promise to do something to be part of the solution, stop being part of the problem, and stop pretending that this isn't something that's happening, right? Ignorance is bliss, but climate change is real. So everybody, raise your hand if you want to be part of the solution. Excellent. There's something you can do in your life to reduce your carbon footprint, the amount of carbon dioxide. Now, everybody, I know I've rambled on. This is a lot to take in, but I do want to share with you, again, a way that you can comment, question, get a hold of me, and that's through my Padlet, which is on the bottom of that calling card, padlet.com/Hendy Woods/Redwoods. You can add photos, though we don't want anybody posting photos of their faces and themselves, because that's to protect our children, our students, protect your identity. But maybe if you drew me a picture, draw me a poster about how to reduce power, add it to the Padlet, do whatever you can. Anyways, you can contact us also on Facebook, CA State Parks, California State Parks at Mendocino, and we're also on Instagram. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of the day. Today, or this week, is Climate Week, so it's important that you pay attention to our what's going on in our climate. Again, thank you so much. My name's Steven Yahelko with California State Parks out of the Sonoma-Mendocino Coast District and Hendy Woods State Park. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of the day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.